July 2011. Reading material for the flight. And tourist guidebook to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Everyone goes to Fiji.
Please take care of yourself. Don't do anything stupid.
The Villa of Las Spa Resort, just 5 kilometres from Visegrad town, has decent accommodation. A perfect spot for a romantic evening. I have a reservation.
That's right.
Dear Tim, let me thank you for your guide to Bosnia and Herzegovina. If I'd known what happened in Hotel Villa of Las, I would not have booked a room there.
I know what happened there. If I include that information in the guidebook, no one will come. And I didn't want to blacklist the whole community.
I didn't really know we could just clean up a place and then pretend that nothing ever happened.
What are you doing here? You work for?
No one. I'm a tourist. When I look through the town, every person that I see, I think, what did you do during the war? Did you participate or you just watched?
Never can that be told. For those who saw and lived through it, who lost the gift of words. For those who are dead can tell no tales.
Šta radite ovdje?
What are you doing here?
I'm a tourist.
Dobro to, ali šta stvarno radite ovdje?
No, what you really doing here?
A za kog radiš?
Who do you work for?
Can I have my passport back?
Pa će pasoš.
Prvo da popijemo kafu. Ja imam rođaka u Australiji.
I have cousin in Australia.
U Sydney.
In Sydney?
Oh, I live there.
Ona živi u Sydney.
Ali ja nisam nikad tamo.
But I have never been there.
No.
To je daleko, brate, daleko.
Ma, kengur.
Kako da se u djeci volim.
This, how you call this?
Pouch.
Pouch.
I Kako se sviđa kod nas?
How you like it here?
Yeah, it's a nice place.
Sviđa mi se.
Sviđa.
6th of July 2011. This is my list of things that I have to get done this morning. So video diary, check. Finish packing, almost done. Books, reading material for the flight. Ivo Andrich, The Bridge Over the Drina, Nobel Prize for Literature 1961. Fictionalized history of the Balkans. English Bosnian Dictionary, check. And Tourist Guidebook to Bosnia and Herzegovina by Tim Clancy, check. Have a shower. I just had what is known in my mind as the last shower because it's such a long time until I get to have another one. Oh, it's open. I just need to grab a couple of things.
Shall I help you?
No, I'm okay.
I brought you some sunscreen.
Oh, thanks, Mum.
I looked it up. It was 36 degrees yesterday in Sarajevo.
Wow.
Fantastic. Yeah. You should go to Fiji with your sister.
Everyone goes to Fiji.
You always have to be on your own. Please take care of yourself. Don't do anything stupid.
How much is this?
What?
$5.
Yeah.
Thank
Hi, everyone. Good morning. This is a film that I just read about in the New York Times yesterday. New York Times had an article about, of course, the 25th anniversary of the end of the war in Bosnia. And let me open that article up. And why I'm hearing my echo. There shouldn't be an echo. Hopefully that stops. So here is how I learned about that video, that film I was showing you that's 7 years old and got some special award about a woman who went to Bosnia-Herzegovina. And this is from yesterday in the New York Times. But this is one of the regular reporters for the New York Times, Andrew Higgins for Eastern Europe. He writes on Russia as well. And so it's a long article. I'm not going to go through it all. It's not too long. It says, it says, as night falls, owls hoot and frogs croak in the forest around Vilina Vlas, a spa gateway in Eastern Bosnia, a spa, resort spa, typically to rest and enjoy mineral springs, hot mineral spring baths. In a very beautiful area, the Balkans, Bosnia, Bulgaria. That's a very beautiful place with lots of hot springs and they're hoping these hot springs, which are very popular among Europeans. Europeans really like going to hot water baths where there's natural hot springs because they think it has strong medicinal values. So it's a big focus of tourism to encourage people to come to your country and enjoy the beautiful scenery while resting at a resort up in the mountains with beautiful hot springs. So, and it's very popular among Europeans, particularly among Germans, right? It says, a gentle wind rustles the pine trees that swaddle the health resort, described by one guidebook as a perfect spot for a romantic evening. Eager for a good rest after a long bus journey, Kim Verkoy, an Australian actress on holiday in the Balkans, checked into the spa hoping to enjoy its soothing calm. So that's the story of the film I was showing you. That's on YouTube. But something was off. She could not sleep. I was awake all night, Verkoy recalled in a telephone interview from Australia. After she returned home, she read up on the place and learned about its story, where the spa resort she was staying in, Velina Vlas. The spa had once been a rape and murder camp. She wondered if she had sensed its history in some way and said she felt duped and angry. I am not a religious person, but I felt awful just being there, Verkoya said. United Nations investigators reported in 2001 that at the spa, the prisoners were raped repeatedly. The investigators detailed how, during the Balkan Wars of the early 1990s, the spa had been commandeered by a gang of Serb nationalist thugs who called themselves the White Eagles and the Avengers. Many of their captors, mostly Bosnian Muslim women, but also some men, the UN concluded, were never seen again. Some women jumped to their deaths from upper floors, while others were killed, suffocated in a system of gas pipes at the hotel. 25 years after the, am I sharing the screen here? I have to make sure I'm sharing the screen. Sorry, 25 years after a peace agreement reached in Dayton, Ohio, ended the Bosnian War, how to deal with the trauma left by the past still haunts the country. Verkoya ended up writing a play about her experience, which was later turned into a film for those who can tell no tales, which I was just showing you, directed by Jasmira Zbanic, a celebrated Bosnian director, and starring Verkoya, who plays herself. You saw her there. For Bosnians, however, dealing with past horror is far more difficult and painful. Like nearly all issues in Bosnia today, views on what to do about the Velina Vlas spa diverge sharply along ethnic lines. Some Muslim victims want the spa razed, torn down in other words, while others think it should be allowed to stand so long as past crimes are acknowledged. Most Serbs want the spa freed from the stains of the war so that it can help the local economy, which relies heavily on tourism and even expand. And you saw the reference to that guidebook by Tim Clancy. Tim Clancy, an American who's lived in Bosnia since the war and wrote the only comprehensive English language guidebook to the country, said he had long wrestled with the question of how long a community should be held hostage to the past. Let's see, how long is this report here? I want to go through it all. Maybe not. I don't want to necessarily go through it all. Yeah, well, just to show you some of the themes, because a lot of these themes are being repeated now in Armenia and Azerbaijan, right? Where you have different ethnic national groups intermingled, people living neighbor to neighbor, village next to village, neighbor within the village to neighbor, and who have a long history of conflict, which in the breakdown of the government, the breakdown of the state, leads to fear and terror and chaos, often exacerbated or intensified by political leaders seeking, political elites seeking support by mobilizing their fellow co-ethnic brothers and sisters around fear and hatred of the other, the enemy. Bakira Hasetic, a Bosnian Muslim who fled her village near the spa in 1992 after a campaign of ethnic cleansing, and this term became part of international law and human rights concerns because of the Bosnian War. The Serb leaders themselves, namely Ratko Mladic, who commanded the Serbian forces in Bosnia, use this term ethnic cleansing to describe expelling, forcibly removing, expelling through fear and terror the Muslims living amongst the Serbs in Bosnia, to cleanse the area of Muslims, ethnic cleansing. And that was part of the function of the killings and the rapes. The rapes and the killings were systematic, partly to instill terror and fear in the remaining populations, so the remaining population would run away, right? So that's one of the reasons why there were systematic rape, just to instill terror in the people, get out or die, or be raped. a campaign of ethnic cleansing by Serb fanatics, described Vilina Vlas, which reopened to paying guests after the war, as the center of evil. Yet this person doesn't think that the spa should be shut down. If we closed every place in Bosnia where war crimes occurred, we would have to shut down the whole country, she said, explaining that all she asked for is a plaque at the spa's entrance to acknowledge past crimes. Raped 3 times herself, not at Vilina Vlas, she said, but at a police station in the nearby town of Visegrad, a school in the Institute for the Protection of Women and Children. That's the name of the place where she was raped. Hasecic has struggled for more than 2 decades to force a reckoning with Bosnia's past. Again, I mean, part of this notion, what happens in the midst of warfare, you know, people's animalistic natures come out. You see this happening often in war, that systematic rape, and it seems as almost like something out of the animalistic history of Homo sapiens, that in the midst of violence, terror, hate, and fear of war, that the notion of defiling the enemy's women and impregnating them, making them pregnant with your own genes, seems to emerge in the midst of these horrible, horrible interethnic civil wars in which there's fear, terror, and hatred and chaos, along with mass death occurring. This woman, Hasecic, she founded the Association of Women War Victims, interviewed survivors, and testified before the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, a court in The Hague, in the Netherlands, which has convicted some of those responsible for the horrors at Vilina Vlas, including a former leader of the White Eagles, Milan Lukic. There is not a single bed in this place in which a woman was not raped or killed, Hasecic said during a recent visit, referring to evidence she collected showing that around 200 women were sexually assaulted at the spa, of whom only 15 escaped alive. Anyone who knows what happened, if they are at least a bit normal, would not stay there. What happened, though not the details, has long been known, starting with a Washington Post report in 1992 of a 17-year-old rape victim and her 15-year-old sister, in a 1996 investigation of the wartime crimes of Lukic by the New York Times. But many guests, like Verko, still have no idea. So keep in mind, remember, Bosnia-Herzegovina is applying to join the European Union, has applied to join the European Union. The Balkans is the center focus of the European Union's effort to demonstrate its ability to bring about peace and maintain peace in areas that have a history of violent ethnic conflict, violent, deadly conflict. Those work at the spa today, and the spa is still there, right? Many of them too young to have played any role in the crimes of 1990 seem to want to forget, right? On a visit in late fall, the spa was busy despite the coronavirus pandemic, fitted with the same dark wooden closets and beds that were there during the war, some still bearing carved wartime inscriptions. The spa, 72 rooms lying long, gloomy corridors covered in stained red carpets. The whole place radiates muffled menace mixed with the smell of cooking oil and cigarette smoke. At any mention of the war years, staff members suddenly become mute or hostile at the spa. An otherwise friendly receptionist asked about reports on the internet of the terrible crimes in 1992, bristled angrily, protesting that the internet is full of lies and you can see everything is all fine here. Built in the 1980s before Yugoslavia, a multi-ethnic socialist state of which Bosnia was then part, disintegrated into war, Vilina Vlas is today owned by the Republika Srpska, a self-governing Serb region of Bosnia. And so Milorad Dodik is the longtime leader of Republika Srpska. It says the region's dominant politician, Milorad Dodik, has repeatedly denied Serb crimes in the 1990s and even dedicated a student dormitory to Radovan Karadzic. Ratko Mladic was the military commander. Radovan Karadzic was the political leader of the Bosnian Serbs. The Serb wartime leader now serving a 40-year sentence after being convicted in 2016 of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Dodik, now the Serb member of Bosnia's 3-person presidency, in which there's a Bosnian Muslim, a Bosnian Serb, and a Bosnian Croat, collectively occupy the 3-person presidency. visited Visegrad in October, ending his trip with a visit to the spa and a promise to invest $1.5 million in the facility to increase its appeal for tourists. This summer, the government of the Serb region started offering residents vouchers to redeem for free nights at Velina Vlas and other spas in the area, which was largely cleansed of Muslim Bosnians during the war. So Muslims and Serbs and Croats lived intermingled together, right next door to each other, house to house. But now they've been separated. Now only Serbs live there because the Bosnian Muslims fear to go back. So what do I want to highlight here? I don't know if I don't want to cover the whole thing. Olivera Todorovic, the director of Visegrad's tourism department and a stout defender of the view that accounts of wartime crimes in Velina Vlas are exaggerated and unfair, said she wanted the whole issue to just go away so that visitors can enjoy the town's other sites, like a magnificent 16th century bridge over the River Drina, which you saw at the opening of that film. We are trying to forget about the war years and develop tourism, she said. Why do we have to keep talking about the past? And Yugoslavia had been a big tourism focus during communist times, right? Before the country fell apart in the 1980s, Yugoslavia was a very popular place. It was a cheap place and a beautiful place for Europeans from Western Europe and Europeans from all over Europe, including Eastern Europe during communism, to go to Yugoslavia for vacation because it was beautiful and it was cheap. Right, and it still is beautiful. And I was there most recently in Croatia, not in Bosnia. I was in Croatia 4 years ago for a conference in Zagreb. So before we go to attendance, please respond to the following statement. Bosnia-Herzegovina will eventually disintegrate with Serb-dominated areas joining Serbia, the Croat-dominated areas joining Croatia, and the Bosniak or Bosnian Muslim-dominated areas existing politically under EU-NATO administrative protection. So let me stop share and go to polling. And let me see if I can find it here. Okay, so launch poll. So is Bosnia-Herzegovina eventually going to disintegrate? And basically the Serb areas, because the Muslims and Croats have been driven out, they've driven each other out. Right? Serbs are concentrated among Serbs now. Bosnian Muslims are concentrated among Bosnian Muslims, and Bosnian Croats are concentrated among Bosnian Croats. Having said that, I already told you that over half of the population of the citizens of Bosnia, which I think is about 4.5 million, don't even live in Bosnia anymore because they can't find a job. They can't make any money to feed their families, to build a future. So they go to Germany or Australia or Canada or US to try to make some money because the economic conditions are so terrible in Bosnia, partly because of corruption, because of the complicated political structure. It's so difficult to make these three groups that generally hate each other, Croats, Bosnians, and Serbs, on a collective level. So that's 25 years ago that the Dayton Accords were implemented. Do you think eventually, sooner or later, that Bosnia is going to have to be allowed the Serbs to join with Serbia, the Croat areas, Herzegovina, it's called, the Croat areas, to join with Croatia, and the Bosnian Muslims will stay under EU-NATO administrative protection, some kind of administrative protection? Okay, so 3 more people to vote. I spoke a lot there. So 30 seconds. $20 seconds. 10 seconds. 2 more people. 1 more person. 5, 3, 2, 1. There you go. So share results. And so it seems to be that most of you agree that it will happen. And I think it's more likely than not. And but this is a topic of great controversy. When I go to these conferences, like I went to this I told you a couple weeks ago, I was attending on Zoom the Association of Slavic East European Eurasian Studies Conference. And there's always a panel there at that conference on Bosnia and Herzegovina and the status of the peacekeeping and rebuilding efforts there. And the representatives of the international community come to that conference. And they strongly defend the Dayton Accords and the efforts of the international community to rebuild Bosnia as a sovereign state that will eventually join the European Union. And but you can see, I mean, these news reports from the New York Times, they say the situation in Bosnia is not getting better, and that's 25 years ago. And with terrible corruption, I mean, there are consequences not just from the people there, there's consequences for the entire region, all of Europe. Because, for example, because of the terrible corruption, the main smuggling route for drugs and other illegal products into Europe is through the Balkans. That's the main smuggling route because there's so much crime, organized crime structures, so many organized crime activities there that's the main smuggling route over land of drugs, for example, from Afghanistan or other areas where opium is grown. The main smuggling route is through the Balkans because of the terrible corruption, because democracy doesn't really work in a place like Bosnia, right? It's an artificial creation enforced by the international community. The international community and the Bosnian Muslims are the primary groups that want to maintain Bosnia, right? The Bosnian Muslims want their own state, the way Croats have their own state, Croatia, Serbs have Serbia, Slovenes have Slovenia. The Bosniaks, the Bosnian Muslims want Bosnia as their state, but they're not even a majority of the population. They're about 1/3. 1/3 Bosniaks, 1/3 Bosnian Croats, and 1/3 Bosnian Serbs. And the Bosniaks want their own country, the way Serbs and Croats and others have their own country. So, okay, so let me, before I forget, let's go to attendance. Hooray, attendance. So we go to week 13, add and smart attendance, and your lucky number is 445. 445 is your lucky number. 445. I have my own, Bosnian, my own Bosnia story. Not Bosnia, Balkan story. I went to Croatia. I went to a conference in 1998 in Croatia, and it was at some island called Korčula, off the coast of Croatia. That is a beautiful area. Like that area, as I told you, has tremendous tourism potential, and that was one of the reasons why the Croats were very supportive of breaking away from Yugoslavia, because they thought that if they broke free from Yugoslavia, they would be able to exploit for themselves the tremendous tourism potential for the Dalmatian Sea, right? These are Dalmatian mountains. Here you see Korčula. So I was at this conference in 1998 in Korčula. And this is an interesting place because this was an island that fascist Italy in World War II claimed for Italy. So the Italians reoccupied it under Mussolini, even while the Italian fascists and the German Nazis supported the Croatian nationalists in creating their own big country that dominated most of the former Yugoslavia. And so this conference was at Korčula, and it was a beautiful place. And so it was controversial though, because I was there at the conference, and the leader of the Croatian government at the time was this man. What's his name? Oh gosh, see what happens when you get to be my age. Leader of Croatia. Croatian War of Independence was led by. Wow. I can't remember. I can't remember the name of the president of yes, Franjo Tuđman. There he was. Franjo Tuđman was still the leader of Croatia in 1998. Intense nationalist, and they criticized the conference I was attending. I popped up on Croatian television. We were labeled by his television network, dominating the Croatian television, as Serbian academics, Serb academics. And so then I went back to Zagreb, the capital of Croatia, to get back to Bulgaria when I was finished with the conference, and I stayed at a hotel, at the Park Hotel well, actually, we had to fly through Zagreb, but I had to go back first to Split. And Split is a beautiful city on the coast of Croatia. Again, see how beautiful this is, this ocean here. Great tourism potential. They have palm trees because it's a subtropical climate. Beautiful place, right? So I was in Split, waiting to get on the bus to go back to Zagreb, and then go from Zagreb by plane back to Bulgaria. And I went jogging one morning in the morning before I was supposed to go to the airport. I got up at my hotel and went jogging along the beach in Split, and I came to an area along the beach, as I was jogging along, and there was some kind of construction going on, and there was no signs or anything, but there was some kind of activity, some kind of construction going on at on the beach there. And so I'm jogging along in the morning, enjoying this beautiful place, on the ocean front, on the beach, and I see this Croatian policeman in a Jeep, and he's 50 meters away, and I see him, and he waves at me. Big, bulky guy, right? He waved like this. So I'm just wearing my jogging clothes. I don't have anything on with me except my hotel room key with me. And he says to me, "You are trespassing. This area is off limits. There were signs. You're not supposed to be here." But that was a lie. There were no signs. There were no signs. And he took me to the Split police headquarters, and they held me for 4 hours and interrogated me with a translator. And I'm getting nervous, right? I don't have any documents on me. I don't have my passport. They go back to my hotel room, and they take all of my documents. They photocopy everything. Eventually, I demand to see the American ambassador. I demand to see the American ambassador. I've been there for 4 hours, right? And they kind of back down, and they let me go. And then after they photocopied all of my documents, and then I went back to my hotel, and I told the person that was running the hotel what happened to me. And he spoke English, of course, and he was disgusted. He was like, they're doing that as security because the Pope John Paul II, the Catholic Pope, was supposed to come to Split and have an open air mass service on the beach there at Split. And the way they were preparing security was that anybody who passed through or walked through that area was going to be arrested and interrogated. There were no signs. They wanted an excuse to arrest anybody and interrogate them as preparation for security for the coming of the Pope, because they were afraid some Serb nationalist or some Bosnian Muslim nationalist might do something, right? Might attack the event while the Pope is there. And he said, the hotel director said, it wasn't just the Croatian police. He said the FBI, the American FBI, was involved in that security operation. So, this really irritated me intensely. It kind of scared me as well also, right? So this is 1998. So then I went back to my office in Bulgaria at the American University in Bulgaria, and I contacted the American ambassador to Bulgaria, a guy named Bill Montgomery, whose wife was a student studying at the American University in Bulgaria. And I sent him an email. He was no longer a U.S. ambassador to Bulgaria. He had moved to become U.S. ambassador to Croatia. So I sent him an email to Bill Montgomery explaining what happened to me while I was in Croatia. And apparently word got back to the Croatian government, because the Croatian ambassador to Bulgaria, or the president of Croatia, would come repeatedly to the American University in Bulgaria and give a guest lecture, a guest talk. Because this was the American University in Bulgaria, but it was funded by the US government, and it was considered to be an unofficial outpost of the United States government. even though, of course, the American University in Bulgaria denied that it was a official US institution. And so they had come there a couple of times, and the next time the Croatian ambassador to Bulgaria came to the American University in Bulgaria to give a talk, give a lecture, he saw me, and he froze. He went, ah, ah, like, like apparently Bill Montgomery raised all sorts of hell with the Croatian government about how I was treated when I was at this city of Split, and it got back to the Croatian government, right? So that's my Croatia story, and I swore I'd never go back to Croatia after that. And that was why the hotel director, when I was there in 1998, was upset, because they desperately need tourism. That place has always been primarily reliant upon tourism for its economic well-being. And so people like me were not going to come back ever after that bad experience of being arrested and interrogated for 4 hours in the Croatian police headquarters. You know, and these police had done bad things during the war, along with the soldiers. These were not nice people, right? Not nice people. But then eventually I did go back in 2016 for a conference, the European Union has played an important role in trying to rebuild the former Yugoslavia, or at least trying to not rebuild the former Yugoslavia, trying to reconstruct or stabilize Bosnia. So the European Union has had responsibility for administering and overseeing this town, Mostar, in Bosnia, which again is in Bosnia over the river Neretva. And the European Union has had primary responsibility for overseeing this town in reconstruction since the end of the war. And so I went to Mostar in 1998 as part of that conference. I stopped at Mostar. A friend took me there, and it was very, very strange. This is 3 years after the war ended in Mostar, and I walked down the main city street, which you can't really see. Half of the city had been cleansed of Bosniak Muslims. The other half had been cleansed of Croats. This is an area where Croats and Muslims used to be intermingled. As a consequence of the war, the populations separated, were ethnically cleansed. So half the town was Muslim, half the town was Croat, and nobody would go back and forth across the border, across the bridge, because they risked being killed, right? But I did, because I was kind of silly, and so one of the things I remember walking along the main streets here, for example, is the avenue, the street was about as broad as the hallway here at the Catholic University of Korea International Hub building. That's about how wide it was. And the European Union had been trying to encourage reconstruction. They began first by planting these big, big trees along the route, along the side of the road. But they hadn't removed any of the war damage. They hadn't removed any of the war fortifications. So this is about, there's maybe 20 meters difference at most, if that, between both sides. And there had been house-to-house combat during the war. So the bags of sand, of plastic bags filled with sand as bunkers to shoot at each other, were still there, with the bags filled with bullet holes, right? I mean, just filled with bullet holes. I mean, people were shooting each other at 15, 20 meters distance from each other with barrages of machine gun fire. Just to give you, and just to give you a sense of how vicious the fighting was in Mostar between Croats and Muslims. So it's not just Serbs and Muslims that did bad things. Croats, Muslims, Serbs in Bosnia were killing each other during the war. So, my point is that if, for example, you can see here, here's a map of Bosnia-Herzegovina, here's Republika Srpska in red, here's a Muslim-Croat federation that the United States and the European Union forced on the Croats and Muslims. The Croats don't want to be in a federation with the Muslims. And they're continually complaining about that. They want their own third entity, like the Serbs have their Republika Srpska. They want their own entity for the Croats, and the Bosnian Muslims will have their third entity. They're continually always complaining about that. And this is where the Croats are concentrated here, right, on the border with Croatia. So they would like to break this off and just add it to Croatia, but the European Union and NATO say, no, 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 no. We can't redraw borders. We can't change international borders, because the process will never stop. You'll never draw the borders in a way that will satisfy people. So no, 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 no. We can't redraw the borders. But if, for example, Bosnia does disintegrate and there is a dissolution of Bosnia, the European Union already has experience administering parts of Bosnia in Mostar. The European Union has directly administered Mostar, this area. So they know, they have experience doing it. They're still doing it. So that's the point I'm trying to make here. Remember, the Balkans is the big test case for the European Union as a peace strategy for peace in Europe, in places like in Bosnia and Eastern Europe, in Ukraine and elsewhere, in states that are not like Germany and France and Italy, right? In states where you have a multi-ethnic populations living together in borders that were drawn by others over the centuries or over the decades, not by them. And they often don't want to be. I mean, these people want to join Serbia. They don't want to be in Bosnia. They'd rather join Serbia. I told you, these Croat people that are concentrated here, they want to join Croatia. It's the Bosnian Muslims and the international organizations that want to maintain Bosnia-Herzegovina as a single state. And so, okay, so that's my story of my experience with the Croatian police in the Balkans. Okay, so we have a debate today, and so we have to make sure that we have the debate. So we have to make sure that I don't forget to have the debate. And the debate is between me and Hyunji Lee on whether or not the European Union will collaborate more with China than with the US to lead global response to the effects of anthropogenic global climate change. So let's go back to the notes for the chapter. You know, one of the reasons why I talk about Bosnia, I talk about these real current events, is because I want to try to make the notes that you were reading from the chapter 9 of the book and from all the chapters to be really vivid and be really understand their significance, their importance in terms of the well-being of human beings, right? So we talked about how the European Union came under, or what was then the European Community before it became the European Union in 1993, was criticized for being ineffective in preventing Yugoslavia from breaking up in a violent civil war. And I responded to that. I pointed out how European Union was not really helped much by the United States. In fact, the United States made it more difficult. Other people disagree, and people still fight about this at that conference that I mentioned, at the Association for Slavic, East European, Eurasian Studies, that they keep pointing out that the war had already started before the Carrington plan or before the Van Zoen plan. The war had already started. Those plans were going to fail anyway. So the only thing the international community really could do was recognize Croatia, Slovenia as independent states, as the Germans demanded, and so on and so on. But still, it's still controversial. And so to go back to the role of the European Union in trying to maintain peace in multi-ethnic states, the commitment was made that the European Union needs to develop its joint military capabilities to deploy peacekeeping forces as the European Union, not as Germany, not as Italy, not as France, but as the European Union. Because remember, there was a bad history of the Italians and the Germans allying with the Croats in World War II. The Croats established a dictatorship in the rest of Yugoslavia under the fascists of Italy and Nazis of Germany. as their patrons, and horrible, horrible things happened to the Serbs. And the Serbs will tell you that. They will never cease to tell you, remind you of what happened to the Serbs during World War II, when the Italian fascists and the German Nazis allied with the Croatian nationalists who hated being dominated by the Serbs. And then they were dominating Yugoslavia when the Germans and the Italians were there, and they did horrible things to the Serbs. And so the point is that if the European Union is going to deploy forces, they have to do it as the European Union. They can't do it as the Germans or the French or the Italians, even as an alliance, if they want to avoid instigating or intensifying these historic fears and hatreds and stereotypes that these different groups have of each other. I mean, Serbs typically think, right? Croats love Germans, love Germany. We Serbs, we love Russia. And so if the Germans intervene in Bosnia again, or Macedonia, it could cause big problems because of this historic fear, right? So the European Union has to develop a common security and defense policy to develop its crisis management and humanitarian intervention capacities. All right, and in terms of its ineffectiveness, it's ineffective partly because of politics and nationalism, right? If you're going to send European soldiers from Belgium or Germany or Italy to go fight and maybe kill people, maybe die, that's going to be very controversial. So your typical German citizen or French citizen or Italian citizen might respond very skeptically to any suggestions that Italian soldiers need to go be sent somewhere to fight and die. Right? So the point is that the common security and defense policy has not been very effective because of national disunity among the member states, incoherence in its international behavior among the different EU actors. I mean, as I told you, for example, most clearly that disunity was evident in the breakup of Yugoslavia when Germany declared to the French and the British, we are going to recognize Croatia and Slovenia. Whether or not you like it or not, France and Britain, we're doing it. And that was kind of shocking. The Germans had not really done anything like that before, not since World War II, acted in a unilateral way. And also with weak leadership. And when the US invaded Iraq, the European Union completely fell apart in 2003, when the US decided when to invade Iraq. I told you that story about how, I outline it here as well, that, Jacques Chirac of France, the president of France, and Gerhard Schroeder, the chancellor of Germany, said, this is a bad idea. Do not invade Iraq. Don't do it. We will not support the US invasion of Iraq. We will veto a United Nations Security Council resolution approving US-led invasion of Iraq. And despite Paris and Berlin's resistance, the rest of the European Union supported the Americans. Some more actively, some more passively, but they did not oppose the Americans. So I said the US was pressuring the European states to cooperate with US-led invasion. Paris and Berlin viewed the US impending invasion as a foreign policy disaster and urged the rest of Europe to reject cooperation, but they cooperated anyway, including all the former communist countries waiting to enter the European Union. Clearly, they did not fear Paris or Berlin's wrath. Now, many argue that it was a disaster, and Paris and Berlin were right. And in destroying Iraq, the Americans helped unleash nearly continuous violence and suffering, which helped set the stage for the 2015 refugee crisis in the European Union. Right? If Iraq had not been destroyed by the American-led invasion, we wouldn't have had that big refugee movement into the European Union that led to the 2015 refugee crisis and the rise of the Alternative for Germany party and so on. In part because of the refugee crisis, the Brexit referendum passed. Because of the people like Nigel Farage exploiting the fear and distrust of all of these immigrants coming into Britain through the European Union, because once they're in the European Union, if they're allowed to stay in Germany, they're allowed to stay anywhere in the European Union, for example. So we wait to see if the Europeans are going to be more effective in opposing US force against Iran. Okay, but now, of course, Trump has lost a re-election bid. But even today, I just saw this morning that There is some talk that Iran, I mean, still some concern that Donald Trump might bomb Iran or allow Israel to attack Iranian nuclear facilities. And I think I told you this lead up to the US invasion of Iraq, I don't think the European Union has really ever recovered from that crisis. I mean, it just clearly illustrated how easy it would be, how fragile, politically fragile the European Union is. Back in 2003, 17 years ago. And if you need another reminder of how fragile the European Union is, we can look 4 years ago, the Brexit vote in 2016. The European Union is politically fragile. For example, the book continues, the European Union was unable to act effectively as a single actor when Muammar Gaddafi, the Libyan dictator, threatened to kill protesters during the so-called Arab Spring. The US got NATO countries, its NATO allies, to cooperate with the United States in bombing Libya, bombing the military forces supporting Muammar Gaddafi. Even little Denmark dropped bombs on Libya. So did France, so did the United Kingdom armies, militaries, but they did so as NATO members, not as European Union representatives, as members of NATO. Germany, just I told you before, just refused to do it, even though the Americans asked them to participate in the air war against Muammar Gaddafi's Libyan forces on the ground. For example, the European Union stood by helplessly as Russia annexed the Ukrainian region of Crimea. Well, again, from the point of view of discussion, I mean, the European Union's integration with Ukraine and encouragement, along with Washington, of a Ukrainian popular uprising against a legally elected pro-Russian corrupt president triggered the Russian intervention. This person, Yanukovych, was the elected president of Ukraine. The election apparently was free and fair, and he won. He was corrupt, but, you know, somebody who defends the Russians and their actions in Ukraine would point out that everybody's corrupt in Ukraine. It's the most corrupt place in Europe. You can't find somebody who's not corrupt, who's politically influential. But the Ukrainian nationalists, mostly young people, concentrated in the western part of Ukraine that had been part of the Austrian Empire before World War I, that the Soviet Union then occupied during World War II. That tends to be the heart of Ukrainian nationalism. By the way, they're Catholics there. They are called Uniates. Hundreds of years ago, the Orthodox Christians in that area in the Austrian Empire, which was a Catholic empire, recognized the Pope as the leader of the church. So they keep all of the traditional Orthodox religious ceremonies and practices and symbols and garb, but they recognize the Pope. They're called Uniates because they reunified with the Pope in Rome. They tend to be the most intense Ukrainian nationalists. And they weren't the only ones, but they led the uprising against Yanukovych. They're the ones that want Ukraine to integrate with the European Union. They're the ones that view the European Union as the blueprints, the prescription, the medicine to fix and help and improve Ukraine, to end the corruption, to democratize Ukraine, to make it a genuine European country, to return to Europe. Right? So I'm not criticizing the European Union and the Americans for supporting these people, because I told you it's so corrupt in Ukraine. I mean, and if you're a young Ukrainian citizen, you don't want to live in a corrupt country where you have to bribe everybody. You can't do anything unless you give somebody money. Nothing works because incompetent people are in charge because they bribe somebody to get their job. It's dangerous, as well as poverty-stricken and ugly and nasty. And you want to improve your country by Europeanizing it, by joining the European Union. What other guidebook do you have in fixing your country if you're a Ukrainian nationalist? What other guidebook is there? What other blueprint is there? The blueprint is the acquis communautaire, the acquis communautaire. That's why the European Union exists, to give hope to these people, right? But if you're a Russian Let me show you. I think I didn't show you this last time. This is an article I wrote and got published a few years ago, and it's a good one. I wanted to show you here a map of Ukraine that I used in this map. See, that's about as big as I can make it here. You can see that it says I'm screen sharing, so you can see this, right? This is where the parts of Ukraine that have been part of the Austrian Empire and that were added by Stalin during World War II to Ukraine. This area, had been traditionally part of the Russian Empire. It says here, it highlights how the borders of Ukraine change. The point I'm trying to make is these countries in Eastern Europe, not to mention Africa, are not like West European countries, right? The Kingdom of France became the Republic of France. The Empire of Germany, England emerged out of the Kingdom of England, right? Germany was united among the German lands into one state. The Italian peninsula was unified into one state, so that most of the people living in Italy are Italian. Most of the people overwhelming majority of people living in Germany are German. The overwhelming majority of people living in France are French. But Belgium is more like this kind of a country, although with less bloodshed and a history of violence and death than Ukraine. Belgium is more like this country. Belgium is more like Bosnia. You can see how the borders of Ukraine changed, right? This was the Ukrainian Socialist Republic after the Bolshevik Communist Revolution during World War I. Then Polish territory given to Ukraine when Stalin and Hitler made a deal and occupied this territory. Romanian territory was given to Ukraine when Romania was forced to give territory to Ukraine by the Germans and the Soviets before the start of the war between Germany and the Soviet Union. Territories given to Ukraine after World War II under the orders of Stalin. Romanian islands given to Ukraine after World War II here to Ukraine, and then this territory, Russian Crimea, given to Ukraine. So this territory had been part of Russia, Crimea. As I told you, for Russian nationalists, this area has a symbolic power of what Dolk Island is to Koreans. And Khrushchev in 1954 gave this territory to Ukraine. So the point is the boundaries of Ukraine have changed and over the years. The most extreme examples of European Union confronting multi-ethnic states and multi-ethnic communities that often don't like each other, hate each other, as a challenge to the European Union as a force for peace in the world is in Africa, right? This is a map of Africa. These different colored patches are different ethnic tribal groups. Look how diverse these countries are, and look where the territorial boundaries are. Who drew these boundaries? These people living there didn't draw these boundaries. The French, the British, the Italians, the Germans, the Portuguese, the Spanish, they drew these boundaries, arbitrary boundaries. And these groups living within these arbitrary state boundaries often hate each other. And so if you're a peace strategy for Europe, you're trying to intervene in states that don't look like France or Germany or Italy. So peace means a different thing in Ukraine than peace means in Western Europe between the Germans and the French. Oh, okay, here's another map of what Yugoslavia looked like before the war, right? Before the war that saw massive ethnic cleansing. There were about 30% of people that were Serb, ethnic Serbs, were not living in Serbia, in these borders that were drawn by Tito and the communists in 1944 in secret. They drew these boundaries, not the people of Yugoslavia. And Serbians were half the population of Yugoslavia. And so keeping Serbia weaker was seen as necessary. Keeping Serbs weaker was seen as necessary in order to pacify or placate the Croats and the Slovenes that viewed Yugoslavia as traditionally an area dominated by Serbians, when Serbs are half the population of this region. So they drew these boundaries, and they put about a third of the Serbian population outside of the boundaries of the Republic of Serbia. You can see lots of Serbs living here, even in Croatia. They made this an autonomous province that was still technically part of Serbia, but had all the rights and powers of any of the republics of Yugoslavia, like Montenegro and Slovenia and Croatia and Serbia were republics. Bosnia was a republic. They made Kosovo an autonomous province that was still part of Serbia, but basically a separate republic. And so if you're a Serb nationalist, this makes you furious. We didn't draw these boundaries. Tito and the communists drew these boundaries. Look what they did to us. And so these people were driven out. Millions of people became refugees in the war in Yugoslavia in the early 1990s. So you saw how Republika Srpska now is almost all Serbian, concentrated here. These people, the Muslims have been driven out. Serbs have been driven out of here. Serbs, I mean, you know, they've been separated through war and terror. And so, yeah, so that I just wanted to show you this article because it highlights these nice maps that I used in it to show you the challenges that the European Union as a peace strategy faces in Europe. So go back to the notes, share screen, back to the notes. I think those are the notes, share. Okay, so so even if you want to deploy peacekeeping forces in Bosnia or Macedonia or in those multi-ethnic states, post-colonial multi-ethnic states in Africa, right, that had been part of the French Empire, the British Empire, or the Spanish Empire, or even the Belgian Empire, right? Belgium controlled Congo as part of the Belgian Empire. You have to do it in a way that it does not look like, aha, again, the French are reenacting their old imperialism, or the British, or the Belgians. If you're going to send peacekeeping forces, they have to look genuinely like they're European, rather than being a facade or a mask for traditional French colonialism or Belgian colonialism, right? But at the same time, there's a paradox because you're relying upon the member states to provide these soldiers, to provide the command and control resources, to provide the effective organizations. So you have to rely upon the European Union member states to provide the military resources and the militaries and the soldiers, but you have to make it look like they're acting in the name of Europe, for real, not in the name of Germany, not in the name of Belgium, not in the name of France. So at times, a crisis or series of them can motivate the European Union to integrate further, including in pursuing greater capabilities in its common foreign security policy. So yeah, I mean, the common security and defense policy is supposed to provide a military capability that supports the common foreign and security policy. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult, right? How difficult, you're asking? Well, let me tell you how difficult. Here's another article that appeared yesterday or a couple days ago in the New York Times, and let's see if I can find it here. What did I do with it? Okay, so let me again. I have to share screen. So share screen and go here. Share screen, and so you see another news report highlighting how Donald Trump's presidency. This is just from a couple days ago. Donald Trump's Brussels, the capital of the European Union, right, in Belgium. Donald Trump's presidency was marked by exceptional contempt for European allies in the NATO alliance, but it also forced European nations to consider whether they had become too dependent on the United States for leadership and their own security, and to ponder how far they are willing to go to defend themselves. But Trump is leaving, and the prospect of his departure has reopened old fissures or breaks between key European allies over their defense relationship with the United States. In a word, the Germans have always been more pro-American than the French, right? And that's been the case forever, since the 60s. And it continues today in 2020, with considerable doubts about what just months ago looked like a determined turn by the Europeans toward greater European ambition and integration in their common security and defense policy. the most immediate consequence has been a bitter squabble between France and Germany over the future of European defense and strategic autonomy, displaying the different anxieties of two countries central to the functioning of the European Union. Again, the French and Germans. We come back to France and Germany. The dispute is a measure of how the raw feelings stirred by Trump's presidency, which raised doubts about America's long-term commitment to global leadership and European security, that a Joe Biden presidency is not likely to ease. Those attitudes helped President Emmanuel Macron of France push the idea of a European strategic autonomy from a change in the United States, one it sees is no longer willing to bear the burdens of global leadership, no matter who is president. So, okay, Biden's becoming president, but maybe somebody like Trump will get reelected. Maybe Trump will come back in 2024. America's changed in the view of French President Emmanuel Macron. Can the Europeans continue to rely upon US through NATO? Macron's worry, French officials and analysts say, is that a friendly Biden presidency will put Europe, and more important, Germany, its largest and richest nation, back to sleep, content to shelter under the American umbrella and reluctant to commit to a more forceful European voice in the world. And so here you go, again, it goes back to right after World War II. The argument was roughly the same as the one Charles de Gaulle of France and Konrad Adenauer of Germany had to handle after World War II, Ischinger said, some person. The French are challenging a bit the need to have America here, and Germans say, I can't live without the security of the Americans, so strengthen Europe to be a better partner. And they've always done that. The Germans are seeming much more fearful of the fragility of the European Union. Germany also considers the US security umbrella crucial for European balance to keep Central and Eastern Europeans committed to NATO and the European Union itself, said Daniela Schwarzer, director of the German Council on Foreign Relations. The Germans want to frame increased European military efforts as part of transatlantic cooperation as a means to the US, as a message to the US, but also to Central Eastern European countries that only trust US security guarantees against Russia, she said. So the Poles and others, Polish people, the Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians, they believe that NATO protects them mostly from Russia coming back and dominating the area, not European Union, US through NATO. So when you talk about building up European Union ability to have strategic autonomy from the United States, that makes a lot of people nervous, including among Germans, who Germany knows that the East Europeans, like the Polish people, remember what the Germans did to them in World War II. And of course, Vladimir Putin and the Russians never quit reminding everybody what happened in World War II. Germany wants to be as inclusive as possible in Europe, while the French are far more ready to move ahead with a smaller number of countries, Schwarzer said. You see this with defense, but also with the Coronavirus Recovery Fund. Jana Pulerian, director of the Berlin office of the European Council on Foreign Relations, notes that NATO and the European Union are fundamental to Germany in a way that they are not to France, which maintains its own nuclear arsenal. For the Germans, European integration and NATO are fundamentally important to German identity, more important to German identity than it is to French identity, this person is claiming. If you take NATO or the EU away from France, the French could do coalitions of the willing. Take them away from Germany and we feel naked, Pugliarin said. The idea that NATO collapses frightens us, the Germans. The problem, she said, came when Macron insisted that he wanted to stay in NATO, but wanted strategic autonomy as well as good relations with the United States. Germans are not sure how that would work, and no one has explained it, she said, so we really don't buy it. And again, this is nothing new. They've been talking about this since the Cold War ended 30 years ago. The French want a more independent, autonomous European strategic military capability, and the Germans are more supportive of the Americans. And they don't want to undermine Washington's support by appearing to challenge Washington's leadership by developing European Union military capabilities, because the Americans may react negatively and say, why are you doing this? Are you going to challenge America? Are you going to challenge Washington? Are you going to oppose? You did oppose Washington in 2003 when Washington asked for Berlin and Paris to help US in invading Iraq. And there's more discussion here about how Germany is more willing to cooperate with Turkey, another NATO country that's not in the European Union, which has infuriated the French because they don't like how Germany treats Turkey and Greece and Cyprus. You know, Greece and Cyprus are part of the European Union. Turkey is not. But Germany is mediating between Turkey and Greece and Cyprus over fossil fuels and other issues in Eastern Mediterranean and regarding the Caucasus conflicts, which supposedly infuriates President Emmanuel Macron of France. France and Germany are also fighting about the future of a joint military project, a new fighter jet, which is not going well, according to Major and Christian Mouling, writer in Le Monde. The project is intended to show that European sovereignty is possible and that Paris and Berlin are carriers of this ambition by developing a joint military fighter jet project. This also means that if this flagship project fails, the greatest damage will be political, not economic. You know, keep in mind, if the Europeans develop a fighter jet, they won't have to buy American fighter jets. They'll build their own. The larger rift began when Kramp-Karrenbauer, she's the German defense minister, sparked Emmanuel Macron's ire in a speech, which she followed with an op-ed piece in Politico, in which she stated bluntly, "Europe still needs America." Illusions of European strategic autonomy must come to an end. Europeans will not be able to replace America's crucial role as a security provider, she wrote. So again, is the European Union going to be independent from the United States? Can it contain the United States when the United States becomes dangerous? She's saying the European Union can never do that. So don't even try, because if you try, you could cause a disaster. So please respond to the following statement. The EU will eventually achieve strategic autonomy from the United States. So let's go to back to the polls. And so respond to the following statement. The EU will eventually achieve strategic autonomy from the United States. And let me make sure I'm sharing the screen. So share screen, launch poll. You have 60 seconds to vote. Thirty seconds. $20 seconds. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. 1 second. And so you see, a lot of you seem to think that the European Union can do this. And keep in mind, you know, in classical realism of Hans Morgenthau, he emphasizes the importance of being prudent, being wise. Do not try to do something that you cannot do, because if you try and fail, it's not like there are no consequences. If you try and fail, you can cause a disaster. What if you try to stand up the United States? You did, the European Union did in 2003 when the Americans would decide to invade Iraq. And everybody saw just how fragile the European Union is. Now you can say, well, they should have stood up to the United States because the United States produced all sorts of consequences from that bad idea to invade Iraq, including the destruction of Iraq and Syria and the vast refugee crisis that happened 5 years ago in Europe that led to Brexit. We have to have our own ability to stand up to the Americans in order to protect the European Union, they might argue. I mean, sometimes America can be bad, despite it being a democratic country. I mean, it elected Donald Trump. He killed the second most important political figure in Iran through a drone strike. I mean, the Americans are supporting Israel, to annex the territories of the occupied territory in Palestine, the occupied Palestinian territories. We've got to be able to contain the US because the Americans are not always wise. And the Germans might respond, maybe, that might be true, they might say, but we can't do it. And if we try, it could lead to the even further, greater disintegration of the European Union. So let's go back to the exercise. So please explain your positions. So let's go into breakout groups. Hooray, breakout groups. And so let me form you into 4 breakout groups and create. And so the person that is number 3, the third person in the list, is the chair of the group. And so Laura chairs group 1, Kinara chairs group 2, and Cho Hyun Chun chairs group 3, and Hyun Chung Song chairs group 4. Groups are open. Explain your position about whether or not the European Union will achieve strategic autonomy from the United States. So, number 3, Laura, Kinara, Chon Hyung Chun, and Hyun Chung Song are the chair of these groups. So, explain your group's position on this question. Laura, you will speak. Kinara will speak. Chon Hyun Jun will speak, and Hyun Chung Sung will speak. And remind you, here is the article. Europe still needs America, Karrenbauer said. Illusions of a European strategic autonomy must come to an end. Europeans will not be able to replace America's crucial role as a security provider, she wrote. And this evidently made Emmanuel Macron of France very, very angry. Laura, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody's talking.
Well, they're in the chat. They're
okay.
responding in the chat.
Good. Kinara, are you leading? Are you taking charge?
Oh, I'm here.
Good. Prepare your statements. Cho Hyun Chun, Are you taking
Yes.
charge? Okay, good man, good man. Hyun Chung Sung, are you taking charge?
Yes.
Good
We're
man, good man.
yeah, we got all our points down, so we're all good.
Okay.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, so heads, group 1 and 2 will speak first. And it is yes, it is tails. So group 3 and 4. So heads is group 3, and it's tails. So group 4. So group 4 is Hyun Chung Sung. Hyun Chung Sung, what's your group's position on whether or not the European Union will achieve strategic autonomy from the United States?
Yeah, so so Europe was historically dependent on the US. And you can just see proof of that from like NATO and stuff. But ever since the rise of far right politics, like a lot of isolationism, protectionism, nationalism, and even separation kind of rose. And Trump proved that the U.S. is not willing to take a leadership role. instead opting to bully his allies. As for Biden, he did win, but it's vague. His stance is vague. He will cooperate with Europe, but is unsure if he's going to take back that role of a leadership role. So the EU will have to break away from its dependence from the United States. The only problem is how will they do that? Like, will there be joint military efforts? But then that's just belligerence. So would have to
Yeah.
show that they're going to be like peacekeepers, like just have the power but not actually like flaunt it or anything like that. But,
Do you think that China will play an important role in what the European Union is able to do with regard to the United States?
not really. I don't really think so. I mean, like China, I guess you can look at it in the same way as Russia, in a way. Like they're totally different. Like Europe, Russia, they're different. China is the same way. They're completely different. Their ideologies are different. The way they conduct business is different. How everything's structured is different. So yeah, the agendas will not really match up in my opinion. Really.
Interesting. Okay, heads is group 1, and it is tails. So head is group 2, and it's tails again, group 3. So Cho Hyun-jun.
Okay. We in sustain of autonomy in EU, we think it is not easy to sustain autonomy from the United States, because in the case of the environmental problem, it is the global issue that need to cooperate each other. And also in case of economy, they relied on each other. And also EU and EU's size that exercise their power is not big enough in compared to China and US. So we said that it is not easy to sustain their autonomy.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I mean, the Germans certainly, I mean, it's, even though the French are more Eurosceptic than the Germans, the French are also traditionally, over the decades, the ones most willing to promote strategic autonomy of the European Union from US and NATO. But even though Emmanuel Macron said a few weeks ago, if they had a Brexit type vote in France, it probably would have passed at one point recently. So even though the French can show more Euroscepticism than the Germans, the French are also more likely to advance or promote this notion that the European Union should be more distant from the United States. And they've always done that. And I think it has something to do with the French being more nationalistic than the Germans. The French are more nationalistic than the Germans. German nationalism is never, I mean, aside from that action to recognize Croatia and Slovenia, which was an act of German nationalism is just much less significant than it is in France, I think. Anyway, okay. Heads is group 1, and it is heads. Laura, group 1, what did you come up with? Laura.
Yes, I'm sorry. I couldn't find the mic. So we came up with the idea that the European Union has a very strong framework to rely on. So with the creation of an independent currency, the euro, and for example, the Treaty of Lisbon, consolidated all to a strong institutional framework. So each of all these stages that the European Union has put in place has created a certain autonomy. These developments have given us a huge market and an area of freedom, which has become the world's largest trading bloc. And although that trading bloc is largely thanks to the European Union, our biggest trading partner, for example, is still China. So I think we do not 100% rely on the European Union and can be, to a certain part, completely independent. And if there would be the need, indeed, for to be completely independent from a changed America, we have everything in place to become so.
You really think, I mean, are you sure that China is the biggest trade partner with the European Union, not the United States?
Well, I looked it up. and the Global Times of 18 September 2020 says that China has become Europeans' largest trading partner.
Okay, okay, I'm surprised. I have to check on that. So it sounds like you're saying we have to stop focusing so much on military notions of security.
Yes.
And the European Union is, I mean, even Americans can't enforce their will in Afghanistan. The mighty United States is losing in Afghanistan. We have to stop focusing upon military notions of security so much. And the Europeans do have the capability you're suggesting to establish strategic autonomy with strategy being more broadly focused on economic and other trends, and not so much on the ability to, bomb people and kill them. Okay. Kinara, group 2, what did you come up with?
We think even though the European Union has become integration, but we don't believe the complete political integration has been achieved. So we think it is just difficult to achieve military independence without the United States support. That it's
Yeah. I mean, I think a German supporter of the German position would be that, even the euro exists because there's political will to make it exist, and the fact that Britain left the European Union shows that we can't take for granted any country's continued membership in the European Union. Maybe the Germans like it more than most other countries, but what if Marine Le Pen wins election next year? I mean, that seems to be one of the concerns. My interpretation of what's going on in France today is that Emmanuel Macron's trying to make sure that, Marine Le Pen of the National Rally for France doesn't do what Donald Trump did in the United States, which is win the election. So he's acting more and more nationalistically, partly because he is, so for example, he's making these, passing these laws against political Islam in France and so on. I think he's concerned to show that, to make sure the Marine Le Pen doesn't get more support in the upcoming elections. I think in 2022, 2 years from now. Okay, we have to go to our debate, and let's go now to the debate. And so let me close those and go back to screen share to the lesson plan, and we have here. Not this, I'll close that. We have here, I don't want to close that. I'm trying to go back to the lesson plan. Let's close that. Okay. And okay, there you see. So it's me against Hyunji Lee. So who's going to keep time for us? Somebody who will volunteer. Who's going to keep time? Because I'm in the debate this time, so I can't keep time. Okay, so I speak for 6 minutes, a maximum, then Khan by 6 minutes, and then Pro rebuts for 4 minutes. Khan speaks the second time, and then Pro has the last word. Okay, so ready, set, go. To South Koreans, the EU will collaborate more with China than with US to lead global responses to the effects of anthropogenic global climate change. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, remember the comments I put on your paragraphs for this week. Okay, Donald Trump lost, but he barely lost. The Republican Party is Donald Trump's party. Donald Trump in the United States is no longer going to be president in 2 months, but he's going to continue to, I think, dominate and control the Republican Party. And he built his political movement on being hostile to international cooperation, certainly on any kind of international cooperation that restricts U.S. economic policy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And one of the first things that Donald Trump did when he was president was withdraw the United States from the Paris Accords of 2015, whereby the U.S. agreed voluntarily to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. That was one of the first things he did. Okay, now he's no longer going to be president, but he's going to continue to dominate the Republican Party. And what can Joe Biden do without the support of the Congress? Because I don't even know if the Democrats are going to control the Congress. They control a majority of the seats in the House of Representatives, but we don't know yet whether or not they will control the Senate majority, because we have new elections coming up for Senate seats in Georgia, the state of Georgia, on January 5th. So a month and a half from now, we don't really know. But I don't think the Democrats are going to win both of those seats. They need to win both of those Georgia, even if they do win those 2 seats, the Senate will be evenly divided. I mean, the point is, the U.S. isn't going to show, I should say, very unlikely to show very strong leadership in this regard, because the president, even if the president wants to, he's not going to have a Congress that's strongly supportive of him. And so, if we need strong radical action to stop greenhouse gas emissions, it needs strong leadership. And I can see Joe Biden trying to use his powers as president through executive orders, like Obama did when he was president, but to radically transform the economy so that the US will be carbon neutral in 30 years from now, by 2050, that we will radically transform our economy. Can the Americans really do that? Europeans appear to be more willing and able to do that for a lot of reasons. And the Chinese, if they want to do something, they appear to be able to do it. I mean, they took control over the coronavirus. Now, some of you point out in your essays that China never adequately addressed the yellow cloud pollution that it was emitting and polluting Korea, despite saying or promising that China would address that problem. And it never really did. So in other words, China, you're claiming, has this problem of implementation. They can't really do what they promised to do. And maybe they don't care so much about Korea, but if climate change becomes a new area for strategic competition, we just did the exercise in strategic autonomy of the European Union, it becomes a new area of strategic competition in the climate change, global climate change issue. Maybe the Chinese will really want to provide global leadership on that, because it'd be an opportunity for them to show that they are the rising hegemon. They are the global leader. Their system is the best. Their system is the one to which the world should look to provide leadership in dealing with this increasingly critical issue and crises confronting human civilization. And the Americans can't do it. Now, we'll see if they are able to do it. I should say that China's commitments has captured the attention of the European Union. There was a report here that I want to show you let me show you here. This is in the European Union's webpage. This is from last month, October. This is Europa, External Action Service of the European External Action Service. This is the European Union's diplomatic service. China carbon neutrality in 2060, a possible game changer for climate. So says the European Union. This is just from not even a month ago. Well, yeah, about a month ago. It says here, this European Union website, last month, President Xi Jinping pledged that China would become carbon neutral by 2060. This announcement could be a tipping point in the global fight against climate change. It will accompany European efforts in the field of climate diplomacy. So, it highlights in the same report, Europe is at the forefront of climate change. The European Green Deal is a central focus of the European Commission's mandate, and so on. And highlighting again the role of China. Since the Rio Summit in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, the Earth Summit, one of the main difficulties in reaching global agreements has been around the question of which role developing countries, in particular China, should play. And so the point is that China's statement has captured the attention of the European Union, given that China accounts for 27% of global greenhouse gas emissions, while US emits 14%, and EU and India with 7% each. So the European Union has captured, the Chinese have captured the attention of the European Union through their
30 seconds.
Okay, so that's where I'll stop. And now Khan will make its opening statement. And let me make sure I share screen with multiple participants. So you're able to share screen if you need to, okay, Hyunji?
Okay. Wait a second. So I will start.
Okay.
So I am on the con side, believing that it is better for EU to collaborate more with US than China to lead global responses to the effects of anthropogenic global climate change. And these are my three subtopics. First is the country that actually has significant impact is US. So this is the graph that shows the proportion of carbon emitted countries in 2019, which, as you can see, China has been ranking the first place for many years now with 28%, while US is 15. However, in CO2 emission per capita wise, US was significantly greater than China, and the United States accounts for only about 5% of global population, but is responsible for 30% of global energy use and 28% of carbon emissions. This results in US per capita emission rate 2.2 times greater than that of China, which houses about 20% of world's population. Um, Carbon emission per capita is measured as the total amount of carbon dioxide emitted by the country, which um, American population, considering that American population is continuously anticipated to increase with extremely high CO2 emission per capita, giving an analyze that US is and will contribute more in emitting CO2 emission. For this reason, it is clear that EU must collaborate more with US in the topic of global climate change since they are the main contributor. Moreover, carbon trading is another issue for America. The carbon trading market was intended to become central pillar of EU's effort to slow climate change. However, by converting the carbon emission by allowance into money, it creates a crack and possibility to emit more carbon dioxide emissions when it can be reduced. Meanwhile, the carbon trading that EU has contributed, the EU emission trading system, is aimed to limit the emission from more than 11,000 heavy energy using installations and airlines between the countries. However, there are only one state of US that is involved in EU ETS, while there are 8 states of China, proving that US is more urgent to take an action with carbon emission rather than involving negative consequences. On top of that, most of EU members are pro-American states. According to the textbook, 13 countries that are joined after 24 were mostly pro-American states. As you can see in the picture, 9 eyes and 14 eyes countries are main allied countries along the America, and the major EU member countries like France and Germany are part of the group. On the other hand, looking in the diagram below, the countries that are allied with Russia and China is colored in red. However, it is unlikely to see Europe countries. Explaining, in other words, many EU members are pro-American and have stronger bonds with America than that of China. Considering the characteristic of anonymous of EU, they can only carry out policies or decisions that lead global responses when all countries are all agreed. When EU collaborates with China that strongly dislikes the offers of the emission limitations that hinders their development, it is expected for China to be uncooperative towards EU and EU members, and it is expected for them to have internal conflicts. The EU diplomat.com quoted that EU China ties since 1990s, it becomes clear that recent tensions is driven by deeper structural factors, and therefore they are likely to stick. The EU can be play as critical role in the global balance of power depending on the extent to which it leads toward US or China, which explains that the pro-American countries, it is likely to cooperatively work closely with China when their actions are highly dominated in the US-China trade war. It is also important to analyze the environmental interests of each president. And first, the China's president, Xi Jinping, he created environmental program with EU like EGP, ESP, and CEWP, and promised to set up environmental policies like pollution control. Which externally showed as if China was highly interested in global climate change. However, many critics have assessed that China has poor performance, with biggest reason of lack of transparency. On the other hand, Joe Biden, the current US president, have highlighted the seriousness of environmental issues, which he first reached with EU to underscore his commitment to deepen and revitalize the EU and US relationship. This is like
Only
a
him
green light.
left.
This is like a green light for EU and US president. And if you compare with China's president and America's president, I believe that it is more likely for America to have environmental interest and passion on global climate change, which is better for EU to collaborate than with China.
Okay, so let me go back to the sharing the lesson plan, the debate topic here. I don't know. I mean, I'll make my rebuttal now. I think, let me make sure I'm not muted. I got to make sure I'm not muted. So I think you can hear me, right? So, yeah. So, I mean, just from the presentation of Khan, it sounds like she's supporting my argument. I mean, she concluded at the end that the European Union is more, has closer ties with the United States, but I mean, but the United States is, I mean, why I mean, I think this is a discussion about America, about nationalism. Most Americans do not pay close attention to these issues. They're not like you and me, right? That tends to be a problem on the part of people that analyze politics or talk a lot about politics or study politics, like college students in college, right? That we tend to assume that everybody's like us, and that's wrong. Keep in mind, I mean, Donald Trump got the most votes of any Republican presidential candidate in history in the United States. Okay, he lost to Joe Biden, and Joe Biden maybe got 7 million votes more than Donald Trump. But Donald Trump, despite all of his problems, got 74 million votes for president. Despite the pandemic, despite the horrible impact of this coronavirus pandemic in the United States, 74 million people still voted for him, despite the terrible things going on that he should be blamed for. I mean, most Americans, they don't think about climate change and want to pay a cost in terms of changing their lifestyles and changing the way they live their lives in order to reduce carbon greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, they don't even want to do it for the coronavirus. Now, you make the point that somehow the Chinese might not want to implement their commitments. What about if China wants to implement the commitments because they think it's a route to global leadership? I mean, the Chinese are so intensely nationalistic. They are so focused upon their notion that they should be a global leader because they were for so much of world history, for so much of world civilization's history. And then they were humiliated beginning over 200 years ago by the Europeans and the Japanese. And now they are 20% of the world's population. 94% of that 1.3 billion people are Han Chinese. They see an opportunity for China once again to play a leadership role in the world. And if they could play this leadership role in a world where you can't do it through military power anymore. I mean, at least 50 countries can make nuclear bombs. Countries are not going to be hegemonic by threatening military force as a major primary means of carrying out their hegemony, because if they do, we will have World War III and everybody will die. So there's going to be a new form of competition for global hegemony.
1 minute left.
Right? And that competition will be, what can you do as the leader of the world to promote sustainable development in the poor countries of the world, like in Africa, like in Asia, that need to develop. They're still desperately poor. And now they have to develop in a way while also dealing with the pandemic and global climate change. And who's going to provide leadership for that effort? And I doubt the United States is going to can make the directed, focused effort that it can. China's already the biggest investor in Africa, even though it's still a poor country. When you divide its economy by the size of the population, it's already the biggest investor in Africa. Even though it's still poor, it's still a developing country. So do not underestimate Chinese nationalism, is I guess what I'm saying. All right, I'll stop there, and Khan will make its rebuttal and conclusion.
Well, first of all, as you said, the Donald Trump, that many people will agree on his side uh, to take environmental issues less. But I believe that that's one of the reasons why he got so many criticisms publicly and also globally, because in order for US to become a global leader, I believe that the country must be exemplar or becoming a like a good example to influence other countries. But just because Donald Trump is, well, I believe so, it's really unlikely to happen for in order for US to take hegemony and act as global leader. And for China, I believe, well, for environment, it can become like a new climate change competition, but I believe there are more on there are more failure case studies that they're more into investments. And I mean, that's something like not happen right now. For so currently to see, I believe, by considering those failed case studies of how China is not showing the huge interest towards climate change and only into their investment, I believe it is not really likely. But I believe, from my opinion, it is more likely for EU to collaborate with the countries that are more having interest towards. Also, if you think of that, US is having a huge contribution in global climate change, I think it is somewhat EU's responsibility, or EU's must more focus on collaborating with America, because they are the one that is more
1 minute left.
likely to happen to like reduce climate change or greenhouse gas emissions, and also for their future global leadership aims.
Okay, does anybody have any questions to pro or con at this time to get a sweet, tasty extra credit point by asking a question? Does anybody have any questions? Maybe you have time to think about it. Maybe let me make my closing statement. Again, let me repeat what I said earlier. China is a poor country. It's the second biggest economy in the world, but it's still poor. And if you divide the size of the economy by the percent by the population, it's still a developing country. And look what they have done. They are the biggest investor in Africa. Now, we know that there are problems with Chinese investment in Africa, but generally, Chinese investment is applauded in Africa. I mean, China has made a difference in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in South Africa. It's built roads. It's built infrastructure. It's made now. There have been problems, but there are always problems. All right. My limited experience talking with Africans is that they are grateful to have somebody who is now a player among investment activists in Africa, who is not the former colonial empire, whether it be the French or the British or the Spanish or the Portuguese. Finally, somebody else who can compete and allow the Africans to get more benefits, because they don't have to rely just upon the former French colonial empire corporate interests like Michelin or Danone or the other French companies to continue to rely upon their old colonial connections and ties to continue to de facto control the life of the former colony. Now they can look to the Chinese. There are some issues, there are problems, but I think you ask most people in Ethiopia today, is China investment more of a problem or more of a benefit? And I will overwhelmingly say that Chinese investment in places like Ethiopia is a benefit for the Ethiopians. And they're doing this as the biggest investor, and they're still a poor country. The Chinese, no, look, you and I do not believe in Santa Claus. You know, Santa Claus, this notion that somebody's going to give you anything for nothing doesn't happen in the world. So of course the Chinese want some benefits. They demand benefits from their investments in Africa. They demand material benefits, and they demand also political benefits. just like any other country does. But I mean, the commitment of the Americans to carrying out this, this global leadership role, I think, is quite questionable. I mean, Joe Biden is going to act like Barack Obama. So what did Barack Obama do? He issued executive orders to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to require car companies to move more to non-gasoline producing through executive orders. He required more pollution restrictions, and that's important, but that's not emergency level action that we need through congressional action in the United States by the US Congress. And I don't think it's going to happen. Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. But we'll see. Again, anybody have any questions? Well, going once, going twice, going 3 times, then I will stop share and we will go to the poll and ask you who won the week 13 debate. Please vote. It's anonymous. "30 seconds. 3 more people need to vote. "20 seconds. "10 seconds. 5 seconds. Okay, and here are the results. And so you can see Khan beat me. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Well, I guess we'll see, because we don't have time to wait on this. So stop sharing, and then let me go back to the next poll and ask you to grade the debate. 1 minute. It's anonymous. Three more people need to vote. 2 more. "20 seconds. 10 seconds. Okay, so there you see the results. And okay, so let me share screen again and look at the notes one more time, and time's up. So I think that's where we're going to end today. Anybody have any questions? Okay, if not, I'm going to end the meeting and I will post the link to the recording. Bye.